Welcome, writers. I have Christy Yaros with me. Hi, Christy.
Sara?
And we are going to talk about something super fun today. But before we get into it, let me introduce Christy to you all. Christy is a certified book coach and story editor working with serious middle grade and young adult writers who want to create stories that engage, encourage, and empower young people. She holds an MFA in writing for children from Simmons University, and she is one of the co-assistant regional advisors for the SCBWI New England chapter. And she is a co-host of the Coaching KidLit Podcast, which is a fabulous podcast. If you are writing for middle grade and young adult, you should definitely check that out. So welcome, Christy.
Hi, Sara. So, what are we going to talk about?
Yes, we are going to talk about overcomplication because that is something I'm sure that no writers ever have trouble with.
Overcomplication. No, definitely.
So
Definitely not.
hopefully we're going to help the writers here to simplify what they need to simplify and focus on what they need to focus on. So when we talk about overcomplicating a story, specifically a novel, what exactly are we talking about with overcomplication?
So, when I think about it, I think of how we tend to, when we need something for the story, we add another element, add another character, add a subplot, add something until we have piles of things instead of things that are connected together and weaving like a web to use. I feel like everything in your novel should have more than one purpose. And if it doesn't, then you're just like, how do you as the writer keep track of all this stuff, let alone how is your reader going to keep track of that?
Yep. Yep. I love that because all the ingredients, it kind of reminds me of that episode of Friends where Rachel's creating this trifle for Thanksgiving, right?
When the recipes
stick together, and she's like, it's got the lady fingers and the custard and the
and
beef
the
and the and it's like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So like all the ingredients in and of themselves are not necessarily bad things, just like in a book, but might not be a good idea to throw them all together at the same time.
right. And maybe if you end up with something that has beef and dessert like together, think, where did I go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, I think this can happen a lot with writers who are perhaps thinking maybe they need more in order to have a fuller, richer story, but that's actually the opposite. Usually we're looking to dig deeper into a story rather than to cast a wider net. So you mentioned some of these more things, which more. So like maybe let's start with characters, cast of characters. What does it look like when we've got too much going on in our cast of characters?
Well, I mean, first, it's why do we have so many characters? And I think that a lot of us, I think, like, to back up, I think sometimes some of us feel, or maybe this is just me, like that you might only have one good story in you. So you're like, I'm going to put all the things into this story because it might be the only novel I ever complete, right? So every character is somebody that I know that had this thing happen to them, and this is somebody else. And then you put them all in there, and like, what are we doing with them? So I try to, and I'm actually guilty. You and I have talked about this in the past. I'm an underwriter, so I'm not an underwriter like for insurance, but I write short and I don't have a lot of characters. So I usually need to try to figure out how to add more in. So it can work the same way if you're undercomplicated, need to overcomplicate. But like, what purpose are those characters serving? And how are they moving your plot and your protagonist and your character's arc forward? So, do you have a character just because you have a funny neighbor and you thought you wanted to put them in there, or can you make it so that that character is the embodiment of something that your character needs to learn, or is going to need something from them to get through the story? So it's like, is there a character who embodies what your protagonist wants to be. This is the best that they can be. Is there another character who models that? Is there a character who can model the worst of if your character doesn't learn the lesson that they need to learn in this story? Is that what they're going to end up as? Is there somebody who is struggling with something and gives them a way forward? And then also thinking about the traits that your character has and how can you create characters that play off of those traits to make them butt heads or create tension or conflict. Like just being, I think, deliberate about what you need and who will best accomplish that. And sometimes that means taking two characters and combining them into one when you get to the revision point.
Yeah.
But since we're talking about kicking off, like maybe just being a little more deliberate about what you choose.
Yeah, I think sometimes too, writers, in an effort to write something that feels authentic, we all have a lot of people in our lives. Like we might have our immediate family, and then our extended family, and then our third cousin once removed family, and then we have our friends, and we have our, the people that we always run into at the grocery store, and people in our community, and before you know it, there's like 100 people that I've made a list of that I'm coming into contact with on a fairly regular basis. And so an author might think, I have to have 100 people in order for this character's life to look like it's authentic. And that's just not the case.
No. And I mean, I like to use this metaphor too, that in the beginning of a story, you're handing your reader a backpack and you're putting things in, and like how much can they carry throughout while they're reading the story to keep track of, to remember all of those things. And Stuart is talking during this summit about backstory. And so like looking at what he's talking about there and saying like, what is it about these characters that can connect them to your protagonist? It's kind of necessary at some point, even if you're not during planning, but during revision, you're going to have to do it.
Yeah, no, I love that backpack analogy. That's really good because the more we put in there, the more we burden the reader with knowledge or information that they might need in order to understand the story. And I don't think there's a lot of people who want to make reading a chore, like a heavy lifting exercise.
No.
Okay, so we've got characters. We've got too, sometimes maybe some subplots, some plot threads that it's like, and maybe sometimes they're not even subplots. Sometimes those subplots are competing with the main plot. And then it's like, oh, what is the actual story here? Because I've got 5 different things all happening at the same time. So how can we avoid having too many threads weaving through our stories?
And I think that's connected to characters too, because you have a character, they need to be doing something. So did they just create a subplot for themselves? Are they trying to be more interesting than your protagonist? And is their storyline trying to take over and compete? Like, what are they doing? And how are they connecting through? So with your subplots, and since I focus on middle grade and young adult, and the younger your audience, the less of that you can have, because again, your readers can't handle that. So I know as you get into adult, you can have more, but still, like how many books are you trying to cram into one book? So I try to think of your subplots and your threads as like, how are they complementing the main storyline? What are they giving us? Again, if you have a character who exemplifies what your protagonist is aiming to be, can you have a subplot where we're seeing what that looks like and how your protagonist is learning from that? We've got our emotional journey and our outward external plot happenings. And so which subplots are moving along their internal journey, and which things do we need to move the external part? And it's again, like the next thing it's all connected. It's just the difference between piling things on and trying to make a tapestry or a spider web where things are, or a murder board, if you want to think of it that way, of how everything is kind of connected. Like, what I'm paying this character to be in this story, like what job can they have and how can I give them more jobs? Can they carry a subplot?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, are they contributing? Are they also contributing to the main plot? And
But
then
certainly if you were to remove it and nothing changes, then just
for
let it
sure,
go.
right? I mean, especially if you're thinking about it in terms of threaded together, like a sweater. If I tug on this and the whole sweater falls apart, like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have pulled that string. But if you can, yeah, if it can come out. And I think sometimes it's what we have in our head. Like, we want this to be in the story because, again, it's somebody we know in real life, or it's something that's important to us. And sometimes you do have, I promise everybody, you have more than one story in you, and you can do more than one. So you don't have to try and put all of the things into this one. So it may just be, that's something I want to explore, but I'm going to explore it in a different story, not in this one.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think too, the other problem that comes when we have too many of these subplots and threads and whatnot is then it's confusion about what is this story even about. And I know that in the work that we do, we tend to work with writers on, you know, what they're trying to say with their story, what kind of point they're trying to make. And if you've got too many things going on, then it's like, oh, well, this is about, you know, being the best person you can be, or it's about finding friends, or it's about, and it's like, whoa, like these are now conflicting with each other, perhaps, and pulling the reader away from maybe a deeper reading experience.
Right. Or if, you know, you're out and someone asks, oh, what are you writing? And it takes you can't even, well, it's about this girl who likes this, but she also likes that. And she does this, and she's got this friend who's like that, and that friend who's like this, and they're going on this adventure. Wait, hold on. Let me back up a little bit. There's also a dog, and they're also going on this trip. And then, okay, you don't know what your story's about. Like, scale it back. Simplify. It sounds so counterintuitive, but marketing and design is kind of the same way. Whenever things that are appealing have a lot of white space, and it's not easily, you don't start with just putting a few things. It usually does start with putting all of those things and then pulling them back until you have just what you need. So it's definitely effort.
Yeah, for sure. So for people who are, you know, since the event is Novel Kickoff here, and I assume most people are going to be in the planning or writing the first draft of their novel. Certainly a lot of this simplification happens in revision. You can't expect to do it all on the front end, but I do think there are some things that you can do on the front end to make it easier for you when you come to revise. So like, what are some things some writers can do here to think more with simplification in mind from the get-go?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think part of it depends on whether you're like a character first or a plot first writer. Like, what came to you first? If your character is the thing that came to you first, and now you're trying to put them in a situation, think about that character, the traits that you want to show, the theme that you want to show, the journey, and then say, what else do I need to get that? If my character needs to learn to be their more authentic self, who can I bring in that's going to challenge that? Who's going to tell them they shouldn't be themselves? Who's going to tell them they should? Who's going to help them figure out who they are and start kind of from what you need and build outwards?
Yeah.
Same thing with your plot. If if you're a plot first and you've got a story, like, what is the best character to embody this journey, and how am I going to plop them in there? And like, just remembering that we are the creators, and we have permission, and you have permission. I give you my permission to do whatever you need to do to make it work. So especially when some of our ideas come from real people are complicated for so many reasons. Your characters don't have to be. So you can give them the traits that you need them to have, right? And make it work from there. So it sounds so easy when you say it, sounds so simple, but it's not. It's not. And I give you that. But I think really, like you said before, starting with your why, like, why am I telling the story? What is the story that I'm trying to tell? And what pieces do I need that are going to help me get there the the most straightforward
Yes.
way, the best way, without all of these extra things. And then, you know, you can always add more in revision, but every character you add, you need to decide, are they a main-ish character? Are they a secondary? Are they a tertiary? Do they need a backstory? Do they need their own emotional arc? Do I have to keep track of them in every single chapter? And you need a voice for them. You need, right? I mean, right? Like, do you want to do that, all of those things to yourself if you don't want to?
Yeah, no, that also maybe brings up a different kind of complication to writers. We won't go too heavy into this because it's probably a talk for another time, but it seems like too writers will often want to complicate how they are telling the story. So not only are we complicating the story itself, but then it's like, I'm going to have 12 POV characters and I'm going to have 3 timelines in 5 different worlds and like all of these things. And it's just like, why are we doing this to ourselves?
Are you trying to call me out right now?
I know, we all do it.
I don't know if I can ever come up with a story that only has one point of view. Of course not. I mean, do as we say, not as we do. We all overcomplicate. But because I think that's also a level of craft thing of how much experience you have, that sometimes you feel that you need to overcome. Like, I need 5 points of view because otherwise I can't do this thing. Well, but you can. You just have to pare it down and think, what do I need? Like, why do I need this extra point of view? Is it because, well, without that point of view, then I couldn't possibly, we can't know what's happening over here. Well, maybe that's trying like a cop out almost on yourself, of not giving yourself enough credit that you can tell the story with less, that you can find ways to weave in that information that you think that they can't get. Unless there's another point of view. I mean, sometimes obviously you do need more than one, and it depends on what you're doing. Like, I think my stories, I tend to like to think about that space in between 2 characters and like what one person says and feels and what another person says and feels, and how everybody thinks that they're the truth, but like, what is that part in between, and kind of leaving it up to the writer. But that's also just so complicated. I don't know. I see a lot of things that end up being in a story because someone had a question that they couldn't answer, and instead of digging a little bit deeper, like you had said, you really want to dig deeper, instead of digging deeper and finding something that already is in your story that you can connect to it, you just add this other thing that now someone asks you a question, well, why is that there? And then you have to explain that, and you explain that by adding something else.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work.
And then you end up with the beef trifle.
And then you end up, right? Like, well, why is this here? Well, someone said it wasn't savory enough.
Yeah, that's true. That's true too. I guess it is worth mentioning to the writers, especially if you're at the beginning, you might not be getting feedback unless you're working with a book coach at the beginning to work out the story structure, which in general, if you can do that, we are biased, but we recommend it for this very reason, because the book coach will tell you you've got 5 different stories going on here instead of just one. But that's another way too that people can overcomplicate by getting too many opinions on what they're trying to do. And like you just said, someone said it needed more of this, and someone said it needed more of this. And I think sometimes we pile on instead of considering what we can remove. So I'm a musician, and I use in-ear mix monitors to hear what other people in my band are playing and singing and whatnot. And always the first words of advice are, if you're having trouble hearing something, instead of turning that something up, try to turn something else down. Because you're trying to, like, because the same thing happens. It's like, oh, I don't hear enough drums, I'm going to turn up the drums. Well, now I can't hear the guitar, I'm going to turn up the guitar. And you're just like adding and adding and adding. And then the next thing it's like, and I've got this cacophony in my ears and I can't hear anything.
Yes. But that's so, so if someone says, well, why did your character do this? Oh, well, because they have a friend who told them to. Oh, no, now I got to add this friend, right?
Yeah.
Instead of maybe there was something in the backstory or in your that you already have there that you can just tap into. Or maybe you just need to change something that you've already got and make it so that that thing makes sense. It's a lot of push and pull and figuring it out, but ultimately even streamlining it it's not just for your reader, it's for you, it's for your sanity. It's for allowing you to get it done, because otherwise if it's nope, now I need to figure this out, I need more characters, I need more of this, you're also keeping yourself from getting the book done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, we won't overcomplicate this anymore, writers. We will leave you with some simple tips here. But Christy, where can we connect with you online? Where are you hanging out?
Oh, well, so my website is my name, ChristyYaros.com. On social media, there are accounts that exist that are usually my name at Christy Yaros. Have not been on social media so much lately, but for sure, check that out. And our podcast,
Yep.
Coaching KidLit, every
Yep.
month with Sharon Skinner is my co-host. And then October 1st, I am doing a mini blueprint workshop, which is a tool that a lot of Author Accelerator coaches use, where you're figuring out a lot of these elements of your story beforehand. Works for if you have a draft, works if you're just starting out, but it's a live workshop. We're going to be hands-on doing this stuff. And this is where maybe you can figure out how some of these elements would best work together to create that web instead of that pile. So if you head to my website, you can.
Yeah, we will have links to all of that, writers. And I'll also just put in a plug for the mini blueprint. It's like one of my favorite writing tools for this very reason, because it really helps you drill down, like, what is the main essence of this story, and what do I really need? What is most essential to pull off this story? And then the rest of the stuff can maybe come and go, but it's kind of like your non-negotiables of what you need to establish. And
then just seeing that all together lets you see that these are all separate things that I cannot connect together versus how can I connect that together. So it's always good to try and distill down first, and then we can expand back out.
Yeah, I totally agree. So writers, is it exclusive to middle grade and YA?
It is not.
Okay.
I mean, there'll be a little bit of focus on that, but no, the tool, as we know, is for everybody.
Yeah.
So.
Great. All right, writers. Christy, I just want to thank you so much for your time and for this conversation that certainly applies to all writers.
Even us.
Yes, we even have to remind ourselves of these things with a fair amount of frequency, but it's just the nature of what we do.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this and for all that you do with all of your summits for us. We appreciate you.
Well, thank you. All right, writers, thanks for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.